Hello students, welcome to lecture 9. This is a little bit change of course of how I presented the lectures in the past. I had some technical difficulties this past Monday with the microphone, so unfortunately my voice wasn't recorded during my on-site lectures. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity to change things up a little bit. I know you're used to hearing my voice. I've heard some complaints that the microphone isn't all that great, so I am working on some changes here. So hopefully that will work well. But instead, what I'd like to do is, give you a chance to see me lecture. I know it's always different when you hear someone's voice and then see them. Hopefully, this is just a good change of pace this far into the semester. Um, Once again, this is for the online students, the MGEL students. It's also for any in-class students who could not make the lecture this past week. Um, the This lecture is about engineer responsibilities and rights, and I'm actually kind of glad that I had the opportunity to do it something differently this week because most of those online students, you have jobs, you're working. The online makes it more convenient for you guys to take this class. So your perspective is going to be a lot different than those students in the lecture hall. I have 350 students in the lecture hall. Most are undergraduates, so they don't have full-time jobs. Some of them have been in internships, so they have some experience, and that's great. A lot of the graduate students also haven't had the opportunity to have full-time jobs or so. A lot of them are going to stay in academia, and this is required for them to continue on for their graduate level degree. So their perspective is going to be a lot different. So I thought that the pace of this lecture is going to be a bit different from what I gave the in-class students. But hopefully we can get through some of this. So bear with me with some of the recordings as I'm still trying to figure out PowerPoint and recording lectures, but hopefully this will work okay. So course expectations. So for this week, this is, I don't know if you may not be able to see my mouse on the slides, but this is the October 29th week. I know we're coming to the end of the week. And we have the homework assignment due Friday, November 2nd. If there's any problems with making this for my online students, please let me know because you're getting this lecture fairly late and the chapter questions are about workplace expectations. So please let me know. Next week we'll be talking about honesty. Um, the online students, I'm just interested in the homeworks that are in black on this slide. The blue slides are for the graduate students that are in class, but that really has to do with more academic honesty, and I don't think that would really pertain to you guys. For those who've been taking the online class, I know I've expected quite a bit from you for the discussion lectures for 1 credit hour class. So I thought that would be a good pass to pass the homework number 4 plus assigned. There will still be a homework number 4 assigned next Monday. We'll have some extra time for you guys to turn that in because of the Veterans Day. So very good. Okay. Usually I'm used to saying, are there any questions? But I don't think I'm going to get any questions today. But feel free to reply. Send me an email or reply to a discussion post if you guys have questions. Um, Going into the project, the homework assignment does have a few questions about the project. I did want you guys to include what your industry focus is, the countries that you're looking into, your team members, of course, and then also this question of what are some of the references you found up to this point. So the real purpose of this is I want you guys to make some progress as far as your progress goes. I don't want you guys to wait the last minute, next month, December, to really look into some of these things. So I'm rolling this into the homework, so you guys get some credit for the homework for doing this stuff, and you're not getting slammed at the end of the semester. Okay. All right. So I didn't get to talk about this much last class, but I did want to talk about it because reverse engineering is pretty prominent in the industry. That has to do with reproduction of a manufacturer's product. You buy a product, you open it up, you try to figure out, you learn about it, and that can be very, very educational. And it happens quite a bit in industry. In class, I gave the example of uh, a safety product. If you're looking into anti-disc brakes for vehicle design, if you go into the Dayton plant where they design some of these anti-lock braking systems, the first setups you're going to see are the ones from Toyota. GM is the first ones to buy Toyota cars, and they're the first ones to take them apart and see what they're doing. It's pretty prominent in the industry, and it could have some ethical effects depending on how we look at things. So let's continue here. So for reverse engineering, there's a lot of good usefulness. It's really to reduce a lot of the development time and development costs going into building a product. And I think now this time of our development, society, technology, it's really changing the way we can reverse engineer things. With 3D scanners, 3D modeling, 3D printing, we can turn that reverse engineering loop down quite a bit as far as timing, and that really helps if you're developing a product. If you have an old component you don't have drawings for, you need to rebuild it, you need to modify it. This reverse engineering is very common. So in there's situations where it's very justifiable to do reverse engineering. Say the original producer of product doesn't make the product anymore, and you still need to make it, or there's inadequate documentation, and we need to understand how this works and some of the limitations. Find this a lot in some of my industries where we're working with older equipment. A lot of the older equipment doesn't have electronic documentation. A lot of that, the hard copies and manuals get lost, or a product needs to be redesigned. Like I said, obsolete materials or processes, and also like for biomimicry, reverse engineering is quite handy. We medical or prosthetic type applications where you're taking a biological something. Maybe it's a crown, maybe it's something to fit on the end of a bone for an amputee. Doing some 3D scanning and kind of coming up with the right shape and the right model and doing some of the work electronically. I think that really has added value for those type of industries. So like I said, there's a lot of advantages: lower maintenance costs, quality improvements, competitive advantages, and I forgive if my picture is in the way of some of these. But is reverse engineering of a competitor's products ethical? Where it gets a little bit dicey. We see this in software quite a bit. We see it in electronic circuitry where someone will even take a circuit board and grind that down, or take some non-destructive imaging tests to re-engineer the circuitry. They can do that with chips themselves. Um, Mechanical design, like I mentioned, with safety systems, but also military equipment. The military is very careful regarding reverse engineering, so a lot of the equipment will either be locked or sealed in a way that if it does get exposed, it is damaged irreversibly. Got to think of it as this message will self-destruct. Well, that is the case, unfortunately, with some of the military equipment. If it's could be prone to be required. A lot of the drone technology. I just finished watching The Bridge of Spies with Tom Hanks a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about some of the high altitude planes that were flying over Russia at the time. And this one particular plane was acquired by the Russians, but it did have some hardware so that would so self-destruct on the pilot's request if the pilot was downed. So it is a topic you're going to see quite a bit in some. Moving on, as far as professionalism in the workplace, this is a very important topic, and really going to define a lot of the aspects of how people see you in your career. So those that have jobs already, this is going to be a lot of the same information you guys have you've seen before. Some things make sense. So really spelling this out for a lot of students who may not have work experience, may have just been in academia, but it's really some of the things you've just learned in grade school. Obviously, treat others with respect, carry yourself with integrity. And from some of the business classes that I took, one of the things that they talked about was credibility. This is an important word for me because credibility is the blend of trustworthiness and expertise. So when you start a job, you're going to be you're new. The resume got you there, but really your credibility is really what's going to be developing the first, and that has to do with first as engineers. It's going to be our technical credibility. Do we understand the type of technology we're working with? And then it has to go with the character credibility. Are we trustworthy? And then wrapped in credibility is loyalty. These are words that someone can have a high degree of credibility. It's not something that they generated themselves. Other people give you credibility. It has to do with doing what you say you're going to do, and that builds loyalty among team members. Professionalism does take an aspect of being optimistic. You have some people that are not as optimistic, but it's important to stay optimistic because you're doing challenging work, especially in our fields. We're breaking barriers. We're doing things that have never been done before. We need to be optimistic. Yeah, we're going to work and we're going to get this thing working and deliver for our customers. And professionalism, from what I see this in class. I see this in some of the discussion boards, you guys, is exceeding expectations. When I say, hey, let's discuss this topic, really putting thorough answers in. It's very clear, which students are really exceeding those expectations. And if I had a choice, those are the students that I would be hiring. Okay, think about those people that you work with, those who exceed expectations for their job. Those are the people that I've heard the term, you want to go to battle with. Not like work is a battle, but sometimes if you want to be fighting on a project for something worthwhile, you want to have good team members. Those that exceed expectations are going to be the ones that deliver the best. Put this up there as a good infographic of other professionals in the workplace. It's mindful to watch these things. Being on time, don't gossip, watch your mouth, dress appropriately, and of course stay positive. So some things to keep in mind. I know in some different stages of your career, some of these will be more of a challenge. Those who are more cynical, the older engineers, maybe they tend to be grumpy, a little more cynical, a little more maybe not along the lines of what management thinks. But it's important to kind of reassess where you are in your career. How are you doing with being on time? And then even that alone can be challenging if you're juggling a lot of family responsibilities. To put this up here because professionalism is about appearance. How you show up to work, it's putting on the right uniform for the job. And as engineers, we're usually working in the office. A lot of times we're working in the lab too, but it's important to mind what are the protocols, what's typical, so we don't falter our work with how we present ourselves because that can be distracting as well. So some of the experience that I've seen, company to company, this changes quite a bit. I've seen engineers show up in shorts every day. I've seen engineers wear ties almost every day, and it really depends on the company, the climate, but also the individual too. So I put up some examples here. Typically, I see business casual or above in the offices. Those who are in the labs, a lot of times they'll dress a little more casually. And obviously, if you have a certain attire for work, that makes the most sense. Then that's appropriate. If you're wearing PPE and you're gowning in a clean room, then it's important to wear comfortable clothes because you're in the clean room for 3, 4, or 5 hours at a time. Or if you're working in the lab or you're putting a system together, you're on the floor, getting underneath the system, bolting things together. It's appropriate to wear durable clothes and such. That's justifiable. However, on the day-to-day, it's good to know how you look. If you have clients coming in, customers, well, typically you dress up for those customers. You're going to see that quite a bit. And often I like to keep a blazer in my office in case we got to do a site tour or upper management comes down unexpectedly. I can throw this on and go from business casual to a little more business. Um, and also for travel, yeah, as you're going to travel, whether it's a customer site or if it's a conference or anywhere else where you're representing the company, it's important to represent the company in your appearance as well. Travel is not just I'm going to relax on the plane while I get there. It's very possible you're going to network with potential colleagues going to a conference, or right when you get there, a customer's going to meet you. So it's a lot easier to dress up and travel appropriately too. Work environment. So I've seen quite a bit difference with how the work environment changes. And we over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of differences and perspectives of how the best work environment really works, and it depends on the type of work too. I came from an area where we had the 1960s style offices where everybody has an office. They close, doors shut, and you can't see anybody. And I think that's fairly isolating. But that was a time where if you had to pass a message, you're getting up and walking to people. Now with the computers, people can be isolated in their office quite a bit, so the open office area encourages more dialogue, more team environment. And I found that to be pretty helpful. However, any change in office environment is really a stressor for a lot of people. So as far as office place decor, always keep it professional. We see a lot of people putting up pictures, and so it's just be careful not to overdo it. I had one technician. He liked plants. He had a lot of vines and plants by his window. When you walked into his office, it felt like walking into a jungle. There were so many plants. So you don't want to be that. You don't want to be that guy. But still, it's important. Mind your lunch breaks, timesheets. So you guys are probably familiar with, and conflict resolution as well. Talking about teamwork, like I said, teamwork is a really important topic, as companies will pay consultants, bring them in just to build up teamwork, to create a high performance team. My opinion, you can't build a high performance team over the course of several months. You need several years to really get to a point where you have a high performance working team. You think about like a professional team, professional sports team, and they can't just throw together everybody in a season and really work well. You have years and years of everybody skilled in their craft and complementing each other. So it takes a while. And I think you'll be lucky if you get to be on a high performance team. Most teams that I have, they perform well, but it's as far as not high performance, because you got to think about the environment, the communication, the management structure, the supervision, and things to help really fuel that team. A lot of things have to come together, so it's really tricky to get a lot of great teamwork, and that's to be honest. The one thing about teamwork is that you can have the right management and the right workplace and the right people and the right climates. You can have all those things and still not have good teamwork. Teamwork is something that sometimes just happens spontaneously, where everything has to align right. And once it does, you want to keep it so. So it's very difficult to force teamwork. Okay. So a lot of these things in teamwork have to be addressed to keep going. And I had one executive talk to me, and he said that teamwork is an individual skill. You can improve your own skill of having good teamwork, and you guys know people who may not have good teamwork that you've had to work on with your teams. So teamwork is an individual skill. I thought that was insightful. With professionalism, there's always attitude. The attitude that you will be willing to seek to perform your duties. You'll be enthusiastic to do what's needed, not forced. And it's sometimes this is hard to keep a good attitude. Um, but know that whether you have a good attitude or you have a bad attitude, you yourself, your name will be brought up in some meeting somewhere with management, and you'll be used as an example, whether it's for good or whether it's for bad. Sometime in your career, it will happen. So think about that. If you will be an example, what kind of example will you be, from those who are working above you to those who are working with you and those who may be looking up to you, whether you like it or not. Loyalty for the company. So you want to perform the best for the company. Your company is your customer, personally, professionally. So you want, you know, they're paying you. You want to do the best you can for them. I have a an example of this. I had a friend of mine, a colleague of mine. We were working for the small company, and he was a system engineer, where I was a photonics engineer developing the technology. And he volunteered to go down from 5 days a week to 2 days a week, because he knew he wasn't having a lot of work to do, and the company was short on money. And we had a conversation, and he said honestly, he said that, you know, the company doesn't need me to. They need the photonics engineer. They need the marketing people to bring the money, but they don't need a system engineer right now. What they should do is just call me in a couple months when they're ready. And I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty self-sacrificial, to make a comment like that. But what he was showing was his loyal to the company, thinking about the company's best interest, not necessarily his own best interest, but his loyal to the company, knowing that, yeah, the company needs this, and to be loyal to the company, I'm going to suggest that, and it might hurt a little bit, but yeah. Um, Long story short, the company did run out of money, and we folded, and we all parted our different ways. But that moment, that conversation, that happened 15 years ago, I still remember that, and that's one gentleman I would be happy to hire to this day, because I know that he exhibits that company loyalty. Company loyalty has changed quite a bit over the last 10 to 20 years, knowing about how that plays with job security. There used to be a time where engineers were not laid off. That's changed quite a bit. As you guys continue in career, it's very possible you may change career paths a few times. You're going to change your role in your career quite a few times. So it's important to think about how, it's where is your job security and how that affects company loyalty. Is be mindful that, even if you don't have job security, that you are loyal to your employer, to your previous employer, and not sharing some of the information. I was talking to a West Coast executive one time out of Silicon Valley, very high technology type of environment where there's a lot of opportunities for engineers. And he mentioned to me about, he said that the workers out there are anti-loyal. And I thought to myself, I was a little confused. What does that mean, anti-loyal? Well, he said employees will come in and they'll work for 4, 5, 6 months, 8 months, and after that time they'll look to make the next step. So they're looking to get a job, to 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 learn some new skill, to get a new role in order to leave to get that next job. And it was such that they're not working for the company's best interest at all. They're solely working for their own. And that's a shame, because obviously it's hard to keep development in a company going if you have people who are coming in and coming out. Job turnover is definitely a big issue. Now, this is might be a little bit different from the idea of job hopping. It really, that can mar your reputation as you go through your career. However, as I said in class, there is some statistics that show that if you stay at a job for 2 to 3 to 5 years, and then move on to the next job, and make those moves a few times in your early career, you'll have better progress as far as compensation, as far as role wise, opposed to staying in one job where you're slowly progressing through the technical stages, or project management, or management, or so. So that, statistically, I've seen that, personally. I've seen that, there's a sense, about mid-career, maybe in your 40s or so, where the gain is kind of flattens out. It doesn't is not as worthwhile, but it's interesting to note. Um, Now, whether that's intentional or unintentional, it's interesting to know how that progression can change. But be wary of the idea of being labeled a job hopper, because that can be deemed as anti-loyal. Management policies. One thing about management policies, especially with your company, has to do with employment contracts. Those who are already working, you're familiar with your contracts. Hopefully, you've read through them. There's a lot of tricky issues that can come up from a legal sense, but also an ethical sense. A lot of these employment contracts are from the perspective of the company's interest to make money. So they're very protective, trying to reduce the risk that they're exposed to as much as possible. Some of the things I'm going to suggest is read the fine print. Um, one example of that, on a couple of the companies that I've been with so far, the fine print is that as you are employed with the company, you're paid for your intellectual services. So any intellectual property becomes property of the company itself. Now that starts making sense. If I'm working for technology and I'm coming up with something, it starts getting a little bit dicey to say, hey, well, maybe I'm a creative guy. Everybody's creative here. If we come up with an idea that's maybe not related to the company, who owns that? Who owns that technology? Um, if I write a song, the song is intellectual property. Who owns that? So a lot of these contracts can be a little bit foggy, and maybe even obtrusive from some perspective. The company I work out now, it is true. If you write a song, that song is property of the company. However, they're mindful that you can write an exemption, a request to get some of that exempted. And even if you come up with some technology that's not related to the business, then they will consider an exemption in that case too. But regardless, it's something to be very, very, very mindful. And the idea that proprietary information, um, that if you're bringing other information from, as you work on a project, for an old company, you're going to gain expertise, you're going to gain experience, you're going to gain knowledge in this field, and you might be hired because you have that knowledge. However, the the ideas of some proprietary information from your old employer, that still needs to be protected. The new employer does not bind the rights to that information. So you have to be very mindful about what you're carrying forward. And I think I made a case with that last class, as far as the software case example. Um, so be mindful of that, and then but also know that you when you're hired in, you're not emptying your brain and coming in with a clean slate. You are bringing in expertise and experience forward, and that's going to be valuable to your conflicts of interest as engineers. Yeah, we do see that there are other businesses, other people trying to influence our decisions. As technical experts, we make the recommendations of which products are going to be the best for certain conditions, and whether that's performance or warranty or business relationship or for cost. A lot of, whatever decision, whatever aspects of that decision that we make, um, it's going to impact quite a bit how other people make their money. So their ability to influence us is going to be, I'll say, challenged. They may come up to conferences and hand you pens and things, and a lot of those things are deemed complimentary. But the issue comes in when what is it that they're giving you, is that trying to influence your professional decision, and that's where it can get tricky. Uh, be mindful of gifts, bribes, kickbacks. The more transparent you are, the early, that goes well in your favor. Um, be mindful also too of sharing a lot of information about your company and maybe your aspects around the business around your company, like your suppliers or vendors, because that can be deemed insider information as well when you're dealing with some financial investments too, which can carry pretty hefty penalties as well. So this is a case from NSPE that I want to cover. Just an overview. This is a conflict of interest case. So let's go through. Pedro works for an employee for QRS on a full-time basis. He has his own separate engineering practice and performs services that are also performed by his employer. His work, all of his clients are contacted completely on his own time, evenings, weekends, using his own equipment and materials. He doesn't attempt to lure business away from his company, and the company doesn't have any policy addressing performing outside work. So the question in this case is, should he request a clarification of the policy? I think the answer is pretty clear. Yes, he should. But I think there's bigger questions that need to be addressed here. Those questions are here. Can he actually perform this work without a conflict of interest? Um, Now he may try to justify. Pedro could justify one way or the other. And it might not be a conflict of interest, but the appearance could be very uh, could could the appearance could be pretty bad. So let's say if he owns his own separate engineering practice, definitely maybe if he has another engineering practice, if the company policy is that you cannot have any other compensated work while you're unemployed by the company, uh, having any type of business could be deemed a conflict of interest because it's dividing his time and his energy away from his company. Um, Having a separate engineering practice, that's a definite maybe. If you perform services that are also performed by QRS, that's an absolutely conflict of interest. I don't think there's any case where Pedro's going to get by with this particular argument. What if he consults for suppliers or clients that don't currently do business with QRS? So is this QRS's business technology? Maybe if it's outside their business quite a bit, that could be a maybe. Let's say if QRS decides to consider some of that, and Pedro may, if he's asked his technical input, he could say, hey, and I don't think that's good for QRS because it could be viewed that he's protecting his own personal business. So that's very tricky. But let's say he starts a business not related to his employer's business. Let's say he helps build an in-home daycare for with his significant other, and has nothing to do with his engineering services. I'd say still that's a maybe. It's probably pretty good argument that it's not a conflict of interest. However, like I said, if the employee contract says no other compensated, then it could be a bit iffy there because of the divided time, divided energy, and perceived a decrease in performance. So we talk about engineer rights, and this has to do with a lot of professional rights. The idea that we as engineers, we have rights as autonomous doers of our profession. Um, so the first one is professional conscience. We have moral autonomy that we can make our own decisions. We can determine what we want to focus our abilities on, how we govern ourselves. We have our own rational thinking. As rights of engineers, we should not give up the right to make our own decisions. That are on our behalf. A lot of people will just be passive and let those decisions happen somewhere else and just say, hey, I don't work here. I just work till 5 and then I'm out. Um, really think about what with that type of perspective, what are you giving up, and that can be real concerning. Another professional right is conscientious refusal. This is where we as engineers can refuse to do something that's unethical. This is an interesting one. So an example is if we are not forced to take a bribe, we are not forced to forge documents. Now, unfortunately, your employer or supervisor may say, "Hey, I need you to sign off on these papers," and you, as your professional opinion, say, "I don't think that's right," and you may be threatened by that, threatened by firing or some other case. Unfortunately, that does happen. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen, and some of the repercussions of that, if you stand your ground, you could face some termination or other type of um, uh, retribution. Unfortunately, that's the case. However, that is our professional right to refuse to do something that we see is unethical. And if there are issues with any type of counteraction because of that, some of the organizations, professional organizations, will help give you resources to back you and try to make your case. But that's the right of conscientious refusal is an important one. Uh, by by coincidence, just this week, I believe it was South Korea just said that the soldiers, military personnel have conscientious rights to conscientious refusal in the military. That's not something that they typically do because if you have a mass conscientious refusal, you may not be able to complete some military action or such. Definitely an ethical issue. Interesting how it's also changing some of the landscape too. Professional rights, your right to recognition and fair pay. This has to do with if you develop a technology where your business, can gain millions of dollars more revenue, be very successful based on your technology. You have a right to be recognized for that. You have a right to say, yes, your name will be on the patent that is applied for. That it won't just be the company. Uh, Generically, if you contributed something, that credit shouldn't be assigned to somebody else. Um, if it's a significant contribution, you should also be expected to be compensated monetarily, and that really depends on the company. I know for some of the companies that I have, if you do get a patent, there is a bonus, $500, $1,000 or so. If that patent does generate royalties for the company, a lot of those royalties, or some of those royalties, a percentage will go to the actual owners who contributed it to it. So some primary owners might get a higher percentage, some of the others may get a lower percentage, but those royalties are spread out a little bit for the authors, for the inventors, which is really encouraging. So that does create an environment, encourages more. So just to summarize the professional rights, we have three rights: rights of professional conscience, rights of conscientious refusal, and also the right to recognition and fair pay. Next week, we're going to cover some additional employee rights that I didn't get to. So a lot of these will be redundant for those who are familiar with employee contracts, and probably you have already had some training in anti-discrimination and sexual harassment. Big topics. Unfortunately, it does happen. Unfortunately, I've seen it happen, and we're going to talk about some ways to help deal with that if you see that take part with yourself or your colleagues that you can give the appropriate support. So I want to thank you for I guess you didn't chime in, but thank you for participating in listening to this. Um, I do have a discussion post having to do with privacy in the workplace. I thought that was an interesting infographic. There's a lot of interesting court cases that you wouldn't expect to swing one way or the other, but it definitely shows that there's a difference in the landscape of privacy in the workplace, and also just personal privacy altogether. We'll talk more about that a little bit. So thanks again. Once again, I apologize for being a little bit late. Hopefully you guys like the different types of scenery here, and I will see you next week.